cord. So that other people can see it. So I'm Donnie Bilo. I am the founder of Girls Guide to Paris, and I just wanted to welcome everybody on this call. The reason for the call is to have a chance to meet and talk to some of the amazing writing instructors that I have coerced into doing this program next year at a beautiful chateau in France, right in the Bordeaux region, not far from where I have a house along the river. So I'm really excited about that. I'm so happy that so many people signed up for this call. I know there's a lot of people who couldn't make it, but I'm really hoping you can watch it then later. So that's why we're taping it. Just to introduce, first of all, Cara Black is the New York Times USA Today bestselling author of 19 books. Unbelievable. In the private investigator Aimé Leduc series. If you haven't, they're all set in Paris. If you haven't read any, like, you run out and get some right now. They're so much fun. She has received multiple nominations for the Anthony and McCavity Awards, Washington Post World Book of the Year citation. She's also received a Médaille de la Ville de Paris, so that's the Paris City Medal, which is very prestigious. I'm very impressed, and she's going to have to, I think, can you wear that around, prance around?
I'll try.
I think that would make us all feel very impressed. And she's regularly teaches students how to write. Lindsay Tramuta started out as a blogger. She is a Paris-based journalist and author. Moved to Paris from Philly 12 years ago. She has been published in the New York Times, the Times Travel Style magazine, Condé Nast Traveler, Wall Street Journal, Afar, Bon Appetit, Food and Wine, Financial Times, goes on and on. Travel and Leisure, very impressive. Basically all the places that you want to be published. She wrote a book in Paris that outlines the new artisans and really what's going on in Paris. And that was very well received. It's a beautiful book. I highly suggest you get it if you can get your hands on one. Sylvie Savings is someone I've known for, I think, since the very beginning of Girls Guide to Paris. She's one of the first writers, and she has made her living writing in one way or another since, really most of her whole career. She's been a copywriter for advertising, Cartier, Dior, Lancôme, Hermès. She works as the Luxe City Guide. If you know those guides, are excellent. She is the Paris resident editor for Afar in Paris, which is also a fantastic travel magazine. And she also has written for the BBC, and she writes for Photos France. And she's just done tons and tons of blog posts, travel-oriented magazines, etc., including Girls Guide to Paris. So we're going to launch into this and talk a little bit. I hope you can see my page here, where just want to go over a little bit about what this writing retreat workshop would look like. It's combining both the writing instruction modules from all three very talented ladies, in addition to some sightseeing. And I'll go through the sightseeing at the end, but I want to give you a chance to hear from these wonderful lady writers, female writers. First of all, you guys will all, once you decide you want to come, fill out a questionnaire, because we want to learn to make sure, we're serving you, and make sure we understand what your writing goals are, what's your experience been today, what you do in real life. We're going to give you a notebook so you can take notes, observe, write down your thoughts. It'll be available for you for your writing assignments, unless you prefer computer. Of course, you'll bring your iPad or laptop if that's how you prefer to write. I frankly can't write anything longhand anymore. And our intro session, so the first day, Tuesday, everybody will just introduce themselves. All the writers will talk a little bit about themselves and, how they got into this whole writing gig. And then we'll talk to you and ask all the participants, what you respond to, what you like to read, what is your favorite format and genre? Are you interested in writing fiction or nonfiction? we've got obviously both type of writers. So that's kind of why I wanted to have 3 different style writers. And so we've got really 2 nonfiction and 1 fiction. And then we'll give you some homework assignments. So then we're going to break up the next 3 sessions. And if you can see on the itinerary, which I'll go over later, there are, basically writing modules each day in the morning, 10 to 12:30. We'll do a break in between, just, go to the bathroom, have coffee. And, but the first 3 modules you will learn from each one of these different ladies, and they're going to teach something very specific. And during these modules, they will talk about whatever the subject is they're going to teach. And then, of course, you're going to have time to actually write. So, Kara, can I start with you?
Sure.
The first, and you will each get a chance to work with each one of these writers. And so the idea is that you kind of have this well-rounded, even though, so Kara, obviously writes mysteries. There's stuff that we can learn from each style of writing that's going to enhance whatever type of writing you're doing yourself. But talk about the premise and how you're going to be teaching a little bit about that.
Exactly, Donnie. It's true. What I will be talking about, the same thing will bleed into what Lindsay and Sylvie are talking about as well. So it's, it's kind of, it spreads out. So I'll be talking about the premise, what is the point of view of your story and plot in fiction? And so basically the premise, what is your story about? Is it going to be a hero's journey, a story of redemption, a love story? Because we'll explore the character's journey, because all characters take a journey in fiction, and their arc, which means they start somewhere, they end somewhere else. How do they change and develop and surmount obstacles through action and reaction? Because that's what, fiction's all about. Throwing an obstacle at your character and having them deal with it, and that reveals character, and that moves the story forward. So we'll be talking a lot about, and maybe I'll talk about it a lot, action, reaction, the change, the development of the character. And then we're going to talk about who's telling the story. Are you writing something with multiple points of view? Are you going to be having a first-person, character? Are you going to be a first-person narrative? A close third person, which is what I like to do, because it's almost first person, but you get the point, but you get the chance to describe things that, in first person isn't there. So what is the plot? It's how the story unfolds. It's the obstacles in the way of characters who must overcome. And so think about this. It's an old chestnut, but I think E.M. Forrester, someone will correct me if I'm wrong. So there's something like the king died and then the queen died, okay? Mm-hmm. But the king died and then the queen died from grief. That's a plot. That's a story. That's something. So a lot of things I'll be saying is, well, let's talk about the what if. So here's something happened. What if? What if? And then what if this happened? I'll be talking about show, don't tell, because we want to examine, if you're using narrative, making it using dialogue, making it with action, and setting the scene. Something that I learned that I think is really important is look at the geography of the page. Look at the book you're reading, look at that page, and is it all one long, just words, narrative? That encourages reader fatigue. Maybe you or I, we just dial off, right? We turn the page. So you want to intersperse and always think about, what does the page look like? Is there going to be some, dialogue? Is there going to be something that keeps the reader going along? And I think we don't talk about that enough. Also, character building. Well, descriptive writing, using sensory details, avoiding adverbs. I'm going to ask everyone to go on an adverb diet. We want to bring the reader to the page. We want them to experience it, especially using sensory detail, all the senses, touch, taste, smell, sounds, textures. So we'll be talking about that. And then character building, which is a big element of the story, because in fiction, or also nonfiction, You've got the protagonist, the main character in the story. You've got the antagonist, who's, you know, a foil to the protagonist. And if you're writing a mystery, it's the villain or villainess. You've got secondary characters, and we really want to, you know, you want to read a story that has fleshed out, interesting secondary characters. And I also think place as a character, because any novel brings more to the table. It paints the time, the social issues, the climate, since characters don't live in a vacuum. Their lives reflect the day, the place at that time in the world. And stories, most of our stories, even if we're writing memoirs or, you know, a travel narrative, hold a mirror to society, right? To that society that we're writing about. So
and
if I talk,
that's a great segue, Kara, because Paris is obviously a big character in all of your books, and probably something to do with why you have that medal that we want you to flaunt around. And I'm going to move in the interest of time to Sylvia, who is going to talk about place. So thank you for making that segue perfectly.
sure.
Sylvia, talk to us.
So I have to find my notes. So creating a powerful sense of place is what can take your reader and bring them into your story with you and get them invested when they can feel the walls and they can smell the air and really forget where they are in space and time and be with you in space and time. So we're going to talk about doing that. And one of the tools is stealing from Kara's adverb diet. We're going to be going on an adjective diet and learning how to talk about a place without adjectives. And trying to define the sense of place, where it is, how important it is, how you use place in your story. If a place comes up several times, it can become a theme. And just for example, if you're telling somebody that you're going to a meeting and they're in a big corporate office and there's neon lighting, that creates a whole different mood than if they're in a small home office that has warm spotlighting. And the importance of creating the entire mood and setting the tone for that scene in your story or your whole story. And it tells you also about the characters, and it can lead the reader where you want them to go. And some of the example assignments or homework or writing prompts that one is describing your kitchen using your senses of touch, smell, sound, and taste, but not sight. So it forces you to see it, not see it in a whole other way, and talk about it and think about all the different ways we perceive what's happening around us. And another writing prompt, everyone will have just traveled to Paris, and to describe one aspect of their journey without mentioning any of the people that are in that setting, and just talking about the actual space. What does that airplane, the seat that you're sitting in, what is the texture of that fabric? What is the pattern? The air smelling like, and just everything about it. The tiny details that will make all the difference in the story later on and making it real for the individual.
Yeah. And you were, I have down here, we were talking about time, chronological order and versus non-linear writing
and how time, how you want to identify time. So if your story takes place over several decades, how do you let the reader know you've gone from one place to another? How using time and weaving it through the story can help create the arc of your story, bending time to make it different. If you're working on memoir, for example, perhaps changing time a little bit will make your story more cohesive. And how do you do that and still keep the reader's trust and you're packed with the reader, and how that works into the story you want to tell.
That's fascinating. Lindsay, talk to us about researching and interviewing and some of the topics you're going to talk to us about.
So researching and interviewing are essential to the work that I do, both in journalism and in the books that I write. And the reality is, even though I don't write fiction, it's a skill that's going to be required for both. So I can't necessarily speak to the actual process of writing fiction, but I know that if you think of any of the books that you've loved, the novels you've There's been at some point some level of research involved in creating a scene, giving backstory to a character, describing a feeling that might have existed at one time in history. All of that requires research. And so I want to be able to talk to you about how you work on that. How do you go about finding out some of the information you might need to make your story as relevant and accurate as possible? What are the kinds of people you might need to speak to? How do you weave them into the story? And also, what are the techniques to interview? In journalism school, they'll talk a lot about interviewing as one of the key skills. And we think about the way people might interview guests on a TV show. So there are similarities in terms of interviewing format and style, but for this kind of writing, it does require pulling out as much information as you can from someone or something that's going to really shore up your story. So again, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, it's a skill that's going to be required and only helps to make a scene, a story, a character all that much more powerful. In my case, with my book, the character was Paris first and foremost. That's the protagonist. And then all the different people I incorporated along the way would be secondary characters. In Kara's book, the city is also a character, but so is her lead detective. So you have to keep in mind how character also plays into your research, because you want to make sure that character, if it is a city or if it is a person, that you have all the accurate details that form that character. In terms of writing prompts, that will obviously depend on the kinds of answers you give us during the questionnaire. But one of the things I was already thinking about was we're going to be in this wonderful location and potentially in areas that you know little about. And so I'm going to send you off on an exercise of coming up with a few techniques for how you would go about learning more about the given place. So whether it's you figuring out who the best people would be to talk to hone in on the past of this town we're going to be in, and who makes it run, and who takes care of operations and everything that might compose this town where we'll be. How do you go about figuring out its past when you're arriving and you know nothing? Imagine you're an investigative reporter and you've done maybe some preliminary research, but most likely you've arrived and are going to let yourself discover what you're going to discover. But that also means you have to be proactive in that. So, I'm going to ask you to think about what are some of the key questions you'd need to ask the people who, are part of this town to get an understanding about what it is and what it believes in. So that's one prompt, but there are going to be loads of others, and I think it's important to understand how interviewing fits into what Sylvia and Kara are both going to be talking about, interviewing and research, because they're all complementary skills.
It's so true too, because I know when I interview you, Kara, for the radio show I used to have, you were telling me how you, just to create Amy Leduc, that you interviewed other women detectives in Paris and talked to the police, the chief of police, and all that. So even with fiction, you think of interviewing as more from a journalistic point of view, but you have to do it as well, right?
Oh, of course. I just had dinner with two policemen last night. And I was, and I'm like, oh, this is great. So yeah, and I run things by them, but it's also about getting the nuance, of what they're saying. And, it's not just the factual details. And I will say what was last night, we were having dinner and one of them got a phone call and he was gone a long time outside. He came back in and he was crying. His father had a heart attack. So
oh, no.
I know it was terrible. And it was kind of good. We were all there to comfort him, and, but he's a human being too. He's not just a policeman is whatever. And then the whole story about his father and their relationship and everything came out. So if I was writing a story of him, I'd have these great, great backstory, But
and you can always turn that into something that happens to one of your characters in an upcoming novel.
Exactly.
So
Yeah,
just to
and
continue
as
with
writing prompts, I think a lot of times for us to avoid a, stereotypical solution is to go, what if? Okay, what if this happened? And I think a lot of mine writing prompts will be, what if this person, didn't turn up or whatever, whatever fits the situation.
So basically looking at all possible angles in which way this story could turn. So, and it's always fun when it takes a different turn than you think. So we will have had those, you will learn those three sort of elements, and then we will be Friday night, we will have a discussion about our writing. I want people to understand that you can set some time aside to speak to one of the instructors. Maybe there's someone after a while that you really feel is someone you can confide in or talk to. And so you will have the ability to say, hey, do you have 10 minutes or 15 minutes here or there when we've got some downtime? I just want to ask you about what I'm writing, and I'm stuck here, and what do you think about going here or going there? So there's going to be, one-on-one time. And then on Saturday, we're going to have our first group session with all three teachers, which I think is a great way, as we're doing now, to play off each other, and you can see how there is this universality about writing. So that day we're going to talk about voice and perspective. Does one of you guys want to, I know Lindsay, you were talking when we had a sort of a pre-call about this, about finding your voice, and that's important even in nonfiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things, this was actually a moderator of an event I did when the first book came out, commented on the fact that I really gave my opinion in some areas of my book, which seems obvious, but it's not always comfortable for people to, depending on what you're writing, it's not necessarily a philosophical book, or it's not, pure political commentary or whatever it is that would maybe lend itself more obviously to explicit opinion. But mine was more of a, factual retelling and chronicle of Paris today and how it's evolved. But that still means that I'm able to infuse my opinion throughout. It's obviously my perspective, so that's how I incorporated it in one way. But, even as minute a detail as a particular development in one area of Paris, specifically in Barbès-Rochechouart, which is in the 18th arrondissement, and a cafe that opened, because I'm remembering the moderator spoke to this example in particular. I write that there, it became a very popular spot. It was meant to try to bring different life to the neighborhood, and yet I had a perhaps negative perspective on what the arrival of this establishment actually did for the neighborhood. And so I didn't hesitate to make sure that my opinion on that was known. So there are ways to give your opinion without it being I feel this, I feel that. And owning that is really important, because not only does it tell the reader that you feel very passionate about something, and it's a reason for them to connect with your story, to keep believing in it, to see where you're going to lead them, but it also makes it easier for you to write. You have to believe in what you're writing. Right. And so you having an opinion obviously is more obvious in nonfiction, but even in fiction, Kara's going to need to actually believe all the details of her character and make sure that she owns every decision she has made about that character's appearance, personality, choices in action along the way. So finding your voice is as much a sort of owning up to what you want to communicate and to express through the story, and also finding a style, which is also something I think all three of us are going to talk about. There are certain schools of thought that will say there is one particular way to write, and and that's it. But that's not true. We've seen that with a host of prolific writers who have established themselves far from the norm in creating a style that might have been considered a little bit rebellious or a little bit unexpected, but that's okay. If it's the way that you feel you need to express yourself, then that's okay, and we'll talk about how you can actually sort of harness the voice that you have within you.
And give yourself that permission too, right?
Exactly.
And Sylvia, you were going to talk, and I know we'll all be talking about this, but goal setting, what's your process, outlining, or that, you know, how to actually get it done.
Yeah, getting started and keeping going. It's super hard. Even well-known authors talk about the fear, is this one going to be good? Are you going to like this work? And it's how it stumps you, and how setting goals can get you through that, what goals you can set, what goals will work for you, sharing with each other what goals have worked for us to learn from one another. And then there's the process of actually how we go about setting up the story and writing her book. She had to figure out who is going to be in it, who's not going to be in it, and there's different ways of setting that up, and how you want to bring people into your story, fiction or nonfiction. You really need to bring people in, and the chronology, if you're going to work from an outline, if you're going to work from cut and paste. Some people take paragraphs and they just glue them all over the place. Some people need to work by hand. Some people need to work on the computer. All that different aspects, talking about how we each approach it, and learning, sharing with everybody else so that we can all learn from each other on some of that.
Absolutely. And Kara, we were going to ask you to talk about, and we'll, again, everybody will pitch in on this, but, you know, the business of writing. You know, you've gotten 19 books published, so we figure you might know something about it.
I don't know.
And that part scares people the most, I think, other than the possible writer's block. But
Sure.
Yeah, you will go over that a little bit with us.
Sure. I think talking about when you've got your draft, you know, the draft of your piece, if it's an article, a book, you know, a memoir, you know, polishing your story, self-editing. And this is after you've gotten the draft, you know, and that can be really tough. There's layers of editing I go through. I go through and edit my work, which is a crime novel, of course, and I have different layers. I do one layer of editing for making sure I have sensory detail on the page, because I'm, you know, bringing you to Paris, to make sure that the geography of the page is not causing reader fatigue. I don't have clumps of information, you know, that would bore the reader. And then I do things like, you know, universal name checks, as simple as that. You know, have I given someone, you know, two people the same name, which has happened, or having names that all begin with M's, or, you know, those kinds of, you know, and as you go through, I found that as I go through and edit for layer upon layer, I see the whole, and for me, I see the arc. I go, I now see what the arc, or where my character is going, and this needs some, you know, strengthening in another place. So I think that's also you kind of learned by reading it over and over.
Yep.
Then I think we can talk about doing your homework before choosing an agent and sending a query letter to agents, and writing that important agent query letter, which is super important. I mean, you can spend, several months on that. I know people that have, but I mean, that's what gets the agent's attention. Right. That's what you really want. And working with fiction editors in publishing houses too, which, you know, we could have big discussions about that, I'm sure.
You could do a whole retreat just on that, and dealing with what they do and don't do for you when you do write a book. That's another whole story. Oh, I have some tales to tell. So, and so basically, I want to open it up now for questions, and then I'm going to go over the itinerary and tantalize you with some of the beautiful places. This is where we're going to be headquartered, so it won't be too stressful on you. Yeah, you will definitely feel like a princess writing her memoirs, I hope. But I want to open up for questions. I did mute a lot of people, but I'm going to unmute anyone. Maybe just raise your hand if you do have a question. And I'm trying to, oh, okay, great. Christy, go for it. I am not hearing you. I don't hear you. I don't know if you have, oh, no, maybe I could, no, I don't hear you. So take a look at your settings on the phone because I don't hear you. Anybody else have a question? You can also, there's a chat box and you can send me a question by a chat box. I know a lot of people are connecting with us on the phone. It is this format is a little difficult on the phone, so I'm sorry about that. Too many people, because now I'm getting feedback. Anyway, anyone else have a question? I'm going through here. Oh boy, that I guess. Christy, you don't have the ability to type in your question in the chat box, do you? No. All right. I think maybe we just have a lot of people on this call, so it's harder to do the question and answer part, which I'm sorry about. But what I will do is, after you take a look at this, for those who are on the line, for not on the line, you can either right now send me a chat to ask a question. And the chat, if you're looking at my screen, I hope you can see there is chat box, and it's here. So, hey everyone, any questions? So if you have any questions that come up for you while I go forward, please send them to me. And I'm going to try and mute folks that are not muted, because I hear some. There we go. So here is okay, so send me any questions you have in the chat box. If you're on the phone and you think of a question and for some reason, like Christy, you can't talk to me, I'm sorry about that. This is a really cool, I love Zoom, but it doesn't always work for everyone all the time, especially if you haven't done it too much.
Are you able to hear me now?
Oh, yes, I can. Yay.
Oh, okay. I called back. So hi. So just from what I'm hearing, it's okay not to have any experience in writing. My intent, okay, good. My intent is like I'm looking into blogging and then also a consulting business. So I just like all the skills you were talking about as far as like your senses and how you communicate, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. So I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding correctly.
Kara, what do you talk to us? What do you think? You've done a lot of workshops and stuff, and I'm I think from my experience, having people on all different levels for the writing workshops I've done has been actually really helpful. I noticed Christy actually took another trip with me. She did the photography trip that we just did in Paris. But what do you think about what I had billed this as is an absolute beginner to a professional. We feel like we can cover your needs no matter where you're at, but we always, no matter how much writing I've done or Lindsay's done or Sylvie, there's always something to learn. And then go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree, because whatever you're writing, I think it needs to have dimension to it, and it's not, there's no one way of writing. I think we've all learned that, but it's giving dimension, or making your scene come alive on the page, in nonfiction. I think you can use every tool, and I think hopefully what we'll be doing is giving you like a toolbox for writers, remembering, remembering what to use and how to use dialogue effectively, and how to avoid, those adverb pitfalls, and, how to pull and make the scene come alive, which is hard to say we only do in fiction, when of course really good nonfiction, like a story in the New Yorker, totally pulls you in. So
agreed.
Yeah.
And I also want to say, for anyone out there, Christy and anyone else who is a total beginner, I find, even if you don't you have a really big career already, but if you just want to do this as something for yourself, I find writing to be very cathartic. You get into this flow thing. It can be a really creative outlet, even if it's just journaling. Maybe you do an article here or there, a blog post for just your friends. It's kind of, there's a little bit of therapy to it, and there's a wonderful I don't know, sense of learning more about yourself in this process. So I think it's incredibly useful, even if you don't plan on publishing anything. But it is, and you know, when I started my blog, I had no idea what I was doing, and eventually, you know, you learn more. You just keep learning more, and eventually, someone asks you to write a book, and you can't believe that somebody was asking you to write a book, and so you know, it's a process, but I think it's really fun. You know, there's moments where it's not fun, but in generally, I've really enjoyed it. So I think it's something available to anybody. I really do.
I just also want to add that this schedule that we have, no, we're not reviewing people's manuscripts. Nobody's coming workshopping their projects. So even if you don't have a project that you're already working on, that's not the objective of this workshop at all, working on personal projects. It's really about honing the craft.
Yep, I agree. I think that's very well put. But we will have a time towards the end of the week to share what you want to share that you've written. That times I've done this, I know that's the scary part. Everybody gets really scared, but it is going to be a completely constructive, positive experience, because we want you to walk away feeling pumped and excited about writing, and you know, launch into doing whatever it is that you set out to do. So, you know, nobody's going to be, you know, this is not a ninth grade paper grading time. It's, you know, it's going to be something quite positive. So, anybody else has any questions? I want them to speak up, or, you know, shoot something on the chat box. Meantime, I'm going to go over real quickly just the fun highlights here, great things we're going to do. And this is where we're staying. It's in the Bordeaux region, so it's about 45 minutes east of Bordeaux. And you will get down there by train or plane from Paris. We're going to, you know, I'm not going to go over the writing part because we already did that, but we're going to have drinks. So we're going to dine at one of my favorite restaurants in Saint-Emilion. This is the restaurant, very modern, so quite different than the Chateau, but it's fantastic, and it looks out over the vines. It's really beautiful. They make their own wines there. For the wellness portion, I'm going to have yoga classes available in the morning and 2 different times for spas. This is my house, so we will do some writing instruction there. It's along the river. And you'll have time that afternoon. This is the first real day for biking or kayaking, or going to the spa, which is walking distance. Or it's right in Saint-Emilion. So I can drop you out there for any kind of treatments, because we do want, I mean, I find that looking at things that are beautiful, you know, enjoying talking to new people and taking care of yourself all really help the writing process. We're going to do a wine tasting, and then we're going to have a catered meal at the Chateau where you're staying. And the next day we're going to go to one of my favorite places to eat in the area. It's a truck stop. The truckers in France eat really well, and it's super fun to see the whole characters there. So you get a real slice of French country life. And then we're going to go visit Michel de Montaigne's Chateau. He is supposedly known for popularizing or in sort of inventing the essay as a literary genre. So we're hoping to get you inspired by that, and then we'll have a writing module. This is his home, so we're going there. That's not too far away. And then that night, we're going to have a nice meal in Braun, which is a wonderful place, really cozy, charming, and fantastic. Writing instruction the next day at the Chateau. We're going to go to Saint-Emilion, which is here. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's absolutely stunning, stunning village. We're going to have a tour of actually this church here. There's another church underground. So that is incredibly cool. We're going to go and explore that. And then we're going to have a meal where we dine at my house that night. And the nice thing about having these meals at the Chateau and at my house is that it really allows us to sit as a group and go over writing, talking about writing, asking questions of the instructors in a more, relaxed setting. So back to the Chateau for instruction the next day. We're going to see these water gardens that afternoon. We're going to have tea and share some of our writing that afternoon. And then we're going to dine in Saint-Emilion at a Michelin star restaurant. And then we're going Sunday, we're going to do writing instruction in the morning, have a picnic, and then go to Bordeaux, another World Heritage Site, UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's absolutely stunning. Hopefully we'll have time to go to the Contemporary Art Museum and have a seafood dinner. It's also along a river, like where we're going to spend a lot of our time. And then we'll go back to the Chateau for a digestif and a time to share some of our work and, you know, just talked about where we've come in this week. And you'd be surprised how just, I think it's like 18 hours of instruction really takes you from A to B. So Elaine has asked a question. And I see Sylvia has answered it. Do you want to, Sylvia, just talk about Elaine's question here?
Sure. Elaine is a publisher and a nonfiction writer already, and she'd like to develop an idea for a novel and was wondering if this is the right workshop for her. And so I answered that with the writing prompts and focusing on the interviewing and the research, which is key to any novel, if you really want the readers to believe you, with all these different sections and using the writing prompts to work on the project she has in mind, that it could really help her zero in on what she wants to write and get it moving forward and help her develop, for example, who her character is going to be, how she wants to work on the secondary characters, where it's going to take place, how to make that come alive. So I do think, yeah.
And she does say she's not a publisher, because I think everybody got really excited just then because they were going to have you publish everything that we were going to write.
Yeah, no,
you're a published author.
Yeah.
You know, I think that you answered that perfectly, Sylvia. But Kara, do you have any more to say about that in terms of, again, the brand new beginner with somebody who's already published a novel? You know, how can you help both ends of the spectrum?
Well, you know, when I started writing, someone told me, you know, you need to write from the heart. You know, if you write from the heart and you write what you're passionate about, that will show on the page. You need a toolbox, you need craft, you need to go through a process and work on dialogue and, you know, what is the backstory of the character. But first of all, where you're coming from, and that will touch on voice and point of view, is believing you need to be passionate. If you're going to spend, you know, a novel is a commitment, right? It takes time to do that. And so you need to be passionate to tell that story. And that in itself, this passion, will really, you know, show on the page and really move you forward. So if you are passionate to tell this story, you know, everything will be helpful to help you, you know, helpful to you in writing it, I think.
And making that jump from nonfiction to fiction is, I think, intimidating.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, so I think, Kara, you probably have the best tools to talk to her about, you know, if you've done nonfiction, which is easier in my mind, and perhaps it's not easier, but to parcel out. But you're parceling out the way you're writing the novels too, you know, and you're breaking them into chunks. And I mean, I think that's the question, is how do you help somebody transfer from nonfiction to the intimidating novel format?
I've never done that, so I can, you know, I think it would be a great exploration. I don't think it's that different. I think it's changing the voice. You know, it's a character that is experiencing this story. It's not you take facts, you know, because you've researched and you found out, but you're telling the story you want to tell that is not fact based. Is what you know, you are taking it and you are fictionalizing some experience, some idea that you have. And so you have a lot of leeway in a way. It can be freeing to just write, you know, I have the seed or the kernel of a story, a true thing that happened, but I'm going to tell it my way. And so I think there's a big freeing aspect to me. I mean, I worry about, for me, it's hard to write nonfiction because I have to worry every fact needs to be correct and on time, and you cannot deviate. Whereas in fiction, you have wings. You can take off and go into another area. So maybe think of it as a way to free yourself.
I like that idea. Wonderful. Well, I really appreciate everyone's questions and concerns, and please shoot me an email after this call. I'm going to send it out, the taping of this, or the taped format of this, to everyone after this call, so that you can look at it again if you want, or send me any questions. If there are particular questions for one of the particular instructors, I'll send it out to them. But we're happy to have happy and really excited to have so many people interested. There's going to be a max number that we can take, so I assume after this call we're going to probably fill up pretty quickly. So if you are interested, I'd love for you to get back to me as soon as possible, just to answer any questions, and then we'll go from there. In terms of that process, if you are interested, I would love to talk to you personally, just to make sure. You can ask any other questions, and then I send out a deposit invoice, which is $1,000 to hold your space, and then the rest of it gets billed next year, like about 2 months before. So that's probably it for today. I want to thank Kara, I want Lindsay and Sylvia. You guys were fantastic. I know we're going to have a lot of fun together, and I hope all of you join us. Not all of you can, but I hope all of you are keeping interested, and let me know. We can always do this again and create another opportunity. So we all like to be at a chateau in France, so any excuse to do that and get inspiration out of that, it's always fun. So thank you so much to everyone, and have a lovely night for those of us in France, and have a great day for the rest of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Donnie. Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.